On Christmas Eve, my granddaughter said, "You're just a burden." I watched her unwrap a designer bag, then left the $18.00 inheritance to her babysitter, who called me family. "You smell like cigarettes and old people. Sitting near the Christmas tree makes it look like we hired a nanny from 1940. That was the first thing my granddaughter Emma said to me that Christmas Eve. She did not even look up from her phone as she said it, just curled her lip, rolled her eyes, and kept scrolling. I stood by the tree, in my best wool sweater, a navy blue one I had knitted decades ago and kept because it made me feel strong. I brushed my hair, dabbed perfume behind my ears, and brought my homemade pecan pie. None of it mattered, not to them. James, my only son, had invited me a week prior, though Rachel, his wife, was clearly less than thrilled. I was not welcome in the guest bedroom because it was being used for storage. Instead, I was given a roll-away cot in what used to be their garage. They called it my private room, with a fake cheer that made me want to disappear. There was no pillow, no blanket, just a folded towel and a scented candle, as if that somehow made the air of old paint and motor oil more dignified. I arrived early that day, as always. I brought the deviled eggs no one touched and wore the red clip-on earrings that used to belong to my sister. No one noticed. The kitchen bustled with Rachel's friends, each one prettier and younger than the last, all calling her Roch and sipping wine I could not pronounce. I tried to help. I offered to slice apples, mash potatoes, even just to clear the counters. Rachel smiled too wide and said, "No, no, Mom, you just relax. We got it." She turned her back before I could say thank you. So I sat on the edge of the couch, careful not to touch the decorative pillows. I watched my granddaughter and her friends laugh in high-pitched bursts that stung the room like perfume. Everything felt expensive. Everything smelled like someone else's life. When it was time for gifts, I handed Emma a small box, wrapped in newspaper and tied with yarn. Inside was a hand-knit scarf I had spent 3 weeks making. It was soft gray, with little flecks of white to remind her of the snowy mornings we used to spend together when she was small. She opened it, held it up with 2 fingers, and said, "This? Seriously?" Rachel chuckled and muttered, "Vintage vibes." Emma raised her voice for everyone to hear. "This is what I mean. This is not a gift. This is, like, something you find at a flea market. It looks like a dish rag, smells like it too." Then she reached for the next box, a large, shimmering one from her mother. She tore it open, gasped, and held up a brand-new Dior handbag. Everyone clapped, phones flashed. I sat still, the scarf now limp in her lap. "Now this is a real gift," she beamed. "Not some gross wool thing that looks like it came from a barn." Someone laughed. Someone else added, "At least she tried." James looked over at me, smiled weakly, and said, "Mom, it's okay. Let the kids have their fun. Don't make a scene over small stuff." Small stuff. I had poured my time, my fingers, and my memories into that scarf, and it was now being crushed beneath tissue paper and designer leather. I excused myself quietly and carried some of the empty plates into the kitchen. The sink was full, the counters a mess. I rolled up my sleeves and started rinsing. Maybe I just needed to feel useful. Maybe if I scrubbed enough, something in me would feel clean. No one noticed me there, no one offered to help. I bent down to grab a sponge that had fallen and slipped on a bit of spilled gravy. My hip hit the floor hard. The sound of it echoed, but the laughter from the living room did not pause. For a brief second, I thought, maybe someone heard. Maybe someone would come check, but the only thing that moved was the flicker of the chandelier above me. I lay there for a second, the world blurring with tears I did not plan to cry, and then I felt a hand on mine. "Mrs. Abigail, are you okay?" It was Clara. She was the babysitter, hired when Emma was little, now still helping out whenever James and Rachel needed a night off. 28, soft-voiced, always smelling like lavender and cinnamon. She crouched beside me, eyes full of concern. "Let me help you up," she said, lifting me gently. I stood with her help, my back stiff and my pride shattered. She steadied me as I gripped the counter. "Did anyone see you fall?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, and if they did, they are pretending they didn't." Clara helped me to a stool. She brought me a glass of water, then wrapped the scarf I had made around my shoulders. "This is beautiful," she whispered. I looked at her. really looked, and something in her eyes told me she saw me, not the burden, not the old lady, but me. For the rest of the evening, I sat there quietly, in that overlit kitchen, listening to laughter that was not mine, surrounded by a family that no longer remembered the weight of my hands holding theirs. But one pair of hands had helped me up. One pair had remembered. And that was enough, for now. I did not say a word, not then, but I remembered everything. People do not just wake up one day and decide to despise you. No, hatred like that brews slowly, fed by silence, pride, and years of things left unsaid. I was not always the quiet woman sitting alone in the corner. I was once head nurse at a bustling hospital in Denver. I was respected, firm, and dependable. I handled emergencies with a steady hand and brought life into this world more times than I could count. And I did it all while raising James, my only child, on my own. His father walked out when James was 5, swallowed whole by whiskey and shame. I never spoke ill of the man, but the silence must have grown teeth. James was a bright boy, restless and full of ideas. When he turned 20, he dropped out of college to chase some startup dream, an app about meal planning or roommate management I never quite understood. I had my doubts. I had seen too many bright young things gamble their futures on fantasies. I told him so. Just finish your degree first, I said. Give yourself a net to fall back on. But what he heard was not concern. It was condemnation. In his eyes, I became the wall that stopped him from flying. When the startup failed, as most do, he never said I was right. He just pulled away, like a dog nursing a wound, eyes full of betrayal that I had not meant to give. Years passed. He met Rachel in a coffee shop, brought her home with stars in his eyes. She was lovely to look at, bright red lipstick, polished nails, eyes that scanned a room like it owed her something. But I saw something else. The quick deflection when asked about her past, the tension when I asked about her family. One night, after too many glasses of wine, she told me about the child she had lost and how she blamed someone else. There were holes in her story, but I said nothing. Later, when James told me he planned to marry her, I voiced my concern. She is not who she pretends to be, I said. You are rushing this. He told me I was jealous, that I could not handle him loving another woman. I did not attend their engagement dinner. From that moment on, Rachel made it her mission to erase me, quietly but effectively. At first it was small, suggesting I stay in a hotel when I visited, forgetting to invite me to birthdays. Then bigger things, removing my picture from the family wall, calling me Abigail instead of Mom. I remember the day I saw smoke rising from their backyard fire pit. I went outside and saw Rachel tossing old photo albums into the flames. My wedding picture, the one with James as a toddler on my lap. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. She smiled. "Purging negativity. Energy matters, you know." James came outside, looked at the fire, then looked at me. He said nothing, not a word. Years before that, James had been in a terrible car accident, smashed ribs, ruptured liver. The doctor said he would not make it without a transplant. I did not hesitate. I got tested. I was a match. I gave him a piece of my liver. They saved his life. And I never told him. Why? Because I did not want gratitude. I wanted him to live without a debt he could not repay. But looking back now, maybe he needed to know. Maybe if he had known what it cost me, he would have looked at me differently. Instead, I became a relic, the burden, the woman who stood in the way. Every family has its myth. In ours, I was the controlling mother who could not let go. They rewrote the past to fit their comfort. It was easier than remembering who held the pieces together. Rachel found subtle ways to cut me down. During one visit, she accidentally spilled red wine on the only silk blouse I had left from my nursing days. "Oh no, this thing must be ancient," she laughed. "At least now you have a reason to go shopping." James said, "Come on, Mom, it is just a blouse." When they moved into the new house, I brought over a framed photo of my parents, Emma's great-grandparents. Rachel opened the wrapping, looked at it, and handed it back. "We are keeping the walls clean and modern. That old stuff does not match our aesthetic." The photo stayed in my purse. I never offered another. What hurts most is not cruelty, it is indifference. The way they made room for everything except me. I used to braid Emma's hair when she was little. I told her stories about stars and angels. She called me Mama Abi. Now, she could not stand to sit beside me. But people do not just wake up and hate you. No. They grow into it, fed by narratives, by silence, and by convenience. And I had been silent for too long. Clara had always been kind, quiet, attentive, with eyes that watched more than they spoke. She was 28, hired to help around the house when Emma was small, and had stayed on as an occasional sitter, errand runner, and companion when needed. James and Rachel liked her because she kept her head down. Emma mostly ignored her. I noticed her, though. The way she always took off her shoes at the door. The way she looked people in the eye, even when they did not look back. And most of all, the way she treated me like I was someone. One rainy afternoon, a few months after that Christmas, Clara and I sat in the sunroom. She brought me tea, chamomile with honey, and handed me a shawl for my shoulders. Something about her felt familiar that day. I looked at her for a long moment, then said, "You remind me of someone I once knew." She smiled. "That is because we have met before, Mrs. Abigail. A long time ago." I blinked. "We have?" Clara nodded slowly. "I was 8. My name was still Clara then, but I went by a different last name. My parents had died in a fire. I was in the system. I got sick, a blood infection. The state hospital said they could not cover the treatments." She paused, eyes misting, but there was a nurse. She wore her hair up in a bun, had silver-rimmed glasses, and she told me not to worry. She used her own ID to sign me in under her coverage. She sat beside my bed every night for 3 weeks, even when her shifts ended. My breath caught. "That was you," she said. I stared at her, heart pounding. In all my years of service, I had done what I could for those the world forgot, but I never thought they would remember me. "You lived," I whispered. She nodded. "Because of you." After I got out, I was moved to a foster home in another state. I never got to thank you, but I never forgot you. I felt tears rise, uninvited. "You changed your name?" "Yes. After I aged out of the system, I chose a fresh start. I went to school, worked odd jobs, and when I found out where you were, by chance, through an old nurse's directory, I applied to be the sitter for your family. I used a different name so they would not suspect anything. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." The weight of it all settled around us like a warm quilt. Someone had remembered. Someone had come back. Clara saw what I endured in that house. The subtle snubs, the rolled eyes, the condescension that stung more than slaps ever could. She saw James ignore my voice, Rachel belittle my presence, Emma flinch when I got too close. She began to document it. Not for revenge, but for truth. Over 2 years, Clara recorded conversations, voice memos, quiet mutterings behind closed doors. Comments like, "Why is she always in the way? She does nothing but take up space. If we unplugged her hearing aid, would she even notice? She is like an old fridge, just sits there using electricity." That one stuck with me. An old fridge. Clara would sit beside me after they left the room and squeeze my hand. "You are not a burden," she would say. "You are the reason I am here." I never asked her to collect those recordings. I would never have dared. But she knew, somehow, that I needed to be seen. She helped me write letters I was too afraid to send. She cleaned my reading glasses when my hands shook. She asked about my childhood, my dreams, my regrets. She made me feel like a woman again, not just a shadow in someone else's home. One day, after James left for a golf retreat and Rachel took Emma shopping, Clara sat me down. "I want to show you something," she said. She opened a laptop and played a file. It was James, in the kitchen, speaking to Rachel. "She is going to die eventually. Why should we keep rearranging our lives for her?" Rachel replied, "The moment she kicks the bucket, we renovate that garage into a wine cellar." Clara paused the video. My hands were cold. "I wanted you to hear it from them," she said, "so that when the time comes, you know you are not crazy, you are not imagining it." I nodded. Slowly, for the first time in years, I felt something inside me begin to wake up. Not anger, not yet, but a quiet resolve. Clara had come into my life like a whisper, but she brought with her a roar. I was not alone. And maybe, just maybe, I still had a choice. Emma's 16th birthday party was smaller than I had expected, but no less extravagant. The dining table was covered in satin runners, the cake had gold leaf lettering, and the playlist was curated by some DJ I had never heard of. Everything looked like it had come from a catalog titled Luxury for Teens. I arrived on time, holding a small box tied with a burgundy ribbon. Inside was a scarf I had knitted just for her, soft cream wool with a border of pale blue. I had chosen the colors carefully, remembering the lake near our old house where Emma used to feed ducks as a child. I even stitched a small initial in the corner. A.E.M. for Abigail Elise Martinez. Her full name. My legacy. When it came time for gifts, I waited until the laughter quieted. I handed her the box with a gentle smile. She opened it, lifted the scarf out, and held it up between two fingers like it was dripping with something foul. "Seriously? Again?" She laughed, loud and sharp. "You are still knitting these things? It smells like old people, like attic air and regret," some of her friends chuckled. Then she added with a sneer, "What is this, a dish rag?" "God, it even feels like one. No offense, but it is kind of gross." Rachel stepped in quickly, but not to defend me. "Sweetie," she said, "remember to be gracious. But Mom, if you want the kids to really appreciate your gifts, maybe think about what is trendy right now. You know, get with the times." I stood there, hands clasped in front of me. My heart felt hollow. The scarf, that delicate thing I had worked on for weeks, now lay slouched on the floor beside a pile of gift bags with Sephora logos and glitter tape. James was on his phone. He looked up for a moment, glanced at me, then back at his screen. Probably business. Always something more important. I bent down to pick up the scarf. Before I could touch it, Clara was there. She knelt, lifted it gently, and brushed it off. Then she wrapped it around her own shoulders. "This," she said quietly but firmly, "is the reason I am alive." Everyone went still. She looked directly at Emma. "You know, when I was 8, I was in the hospital. I was alone, no family, no one. And this woman, your grandmother, made me a scarf just like this. I still have it, and it was the first thing that made me feel warm, inside and out. So maybe check your tone before throwing words like gross around." Rachel started to protest. "Clara, that is really not your place." Clara turned to her. "Maybe not, but someone in this room needs to say it." James finally spoke. "Clara, I think that is enough." Clara shrugged. "I think Mrs. Martinez has had more than enough." She helped me to the kitchen, away from the stares and fake smiles. Once there, she placed the scarf in my lap and said, "You still make beautiful things. They just do not deserve them." That night, she made a decision. One I did not ask for, but one she made from love. She compiled every recording she had taken over the past 2 years, the whispered insults, the jokes made at my expense, the cruel comparisons. She is like a roach, just will not leave. We should get her one of those silent alarms. She falls, no one hears it. Problem solved. Her food smells like the Depression era. No wonder Emma never eats at home. And the one that broke her? She is a broken fridge, useless, old, still running up the bill. Clara labeled every file, time, date, context. She uploaded them to a secure drive and backed them up twice. "I know a lawyer," she told me, "a good one, someone who has worked with elder abuse cases. Not physical, emotional, psychological. Neglect. Dignity stripped away in silence." I did not speak for a while. Finally I said, "What are you planning to do with them?" She looked me in the eyes. "Whatever you want. But you should know the truth is yours now. In your hands, not theirs." I nodded. And then, for the first time in decades, I slept soundly because someone saw me, and someone remembered, and that meant, perhaps, I was not just surviving. Perhaps I was beginning to live again. It had been weeks since Clara gave me the recordings. Weeks since I heard my own son refer to me as a liability. Since I watched my granddaughter compare my hand-knitted gift to a dirty rag. Since Rachel laughed as if cruelty was comedy. I'd spent most of my life staying silent, doing what needed to be done, enduring, swallowing, smiling through clenched teeth. But there comes a time, even for the quiet ones, when silence begins to rot from the inside. So I made a call. His name was Benjamin Lyle, an attorney I had worked with once during my nursing years when a hospital tried to cut pensions for retired staff. He was sharp, discreet, and most importantly, he listened. I invited him to meet me at Clara's apartment. It was safer there, private. No one from the family would suspect a thing. I laid everything out, my assets, my accounts, my intentions, and Clara sat beside me, not saying much, just present, a steady heartbeat next to mine. 9 million, I said, from the royalties of the patient monitoring device I helped design in the early 90s. I still get a percentage. Most people forgot it was my idea, but the patent remembers. Benjamin nodded, noting it down. Another 6 million, I continued, in hospital stocks. I invested every time I got a raise. They laughed, said nurses don't play the market. I played it like a violin. He smiled. And 3 million more from the sale of my emergency mask design. I submitted it in 2020 during the first wave. They mass-produced it in 3 countries. I took a quiet check and never spoke of it again. He leaned back. That totals 18 million, Mrs. Martinez. I nodded. What would you like to do with it? I looked at Clara. She did not smile. She simply met my eyes and nodded once. I want to create a fund, I said, for women like me, like Clara, for the overlooked, the dismissed, the forgotten. It will be called the Abigail Fund. Benjamin raised an eyebrow. And the beneficiaries? Clara will oversee it, I said. She knows who we are. She sees us. She is us. He wrote it down. And your family? What about them? He hesitated. Do you wish to leave anything to them? A percentage? A gesture? Even just a token? I paused. Then I leaned forward. I leave them the memories. I leave them the words they said when they thought I was too old to matter. I leave them the silence they gave me when I needed them most. He nodded slowly. So, nothing tangible? I smiled, soft and sharp. I leave them the echo of their own voices. And that is enough to haunt a lifetime. We spent the next hours reviewing documents, updating beneficiaries, sealing away the details in legalese. Clara brewed tea. Benjamin was efficient, kind. He never once looked at me like I was fragile. Before he left, he asked one more question. Mrs. Martinez, are you certain? It is not too late to reconsider. I looked out the window. Outside, the wind rustled the bare branches. When I gave my liver to James, I said, I did not tell him. I thought love meant never needing repayment, but now I see love without memory becomes entitlement. This fund is not revenge. It is a correction, a recalibration of what is just. He closed his briefcase. Understood. After he left, Clara sat beside me. You okay? She asked. I nodded. For the first time in years, we sipped our tea. We watched the wind. In the stillness, I imagined the day they would learn the truth. I imagined their faces, the shock, the outrage, the scramble to pretend they cared. And I imagined myself not being there. Because justice, when it finally comes, does not need witnesses. It only needs to be written. And now it was. The invitation came in a cream-colored envelope with gold-embossed letters. Holiday Appreciation Gala, honoring community contributors. It was being held at the community center, a place I had helped fund anonymously years ago when their heating system failed. James and Rachel were on the board now, their names listed under platinum sponsors. I arrived with Clara. She held my arm like I was made of something precious. The room was warm, with garland and string lights. There were tables draped in velvet, people dressed like catalogs, champagne flutes raised like status symbols. Rachel greeted guests at the door with the grace of someone who rehearsed her smile in the mirror. James stood near the podium, his hand always grazing his phone, scanning for important people. Emma floated between groups of teenagers, snapping photos and tossing her hair like a commercial. No one noticed me. Until Benjamin Lyle took the stage. The microphone gave a soft pop. People turned. He introduced himself as an attorney representing Abigail Martinez. That name turned a few heads. Benjamin's voice was calm, almost gentle. Thank you all for attending this evening. Before we continue with the recognitions, I have been asked to share a message and legal declaration on behalf of a woman many of you know, though some may not have seen her lately. A few murmurs, some glances toward the back. Clara squeezed my hand. Benjamin continued. Mrs. Abigail Martinez, a long-standing member of this community, has finalized her estate. Her total assets amount to $18 million. Gasps rippled across the room. Benjamin lifted a small remote. But before we discuss distribution, Mrs. Martinez has asked that we share a few recordings. A large screen flickered on. Audio filled the room. Emma's voice, clear, sharp. Why is she even at my party? She should be in the garage. That is where she belongs. Rachel, chuckling. Honestly, she is the best cautionary tale I could give my daughter. That is what happens when you have nothing to offer. James, dry and dismissive. Every month she lives costs us more. That is just math. The room was silent. No one blinked. Then Benjamin spoke again. Mrs. Martinez spent her life in service, to hospitals, to patients, and to a family that increasingly chose to forget her. But one person remembered. He turned the page in his folder. Per wishes, the entire estate of Abigail Martinez, including all financial assets, property, and intellectual rights, shall be transferred to Clara Martinez. He let the name hang. Gasps again. Not by blood, he added, but by bond. Every eye turned. Rachel's face was drained of color. Emma's phone slipped from her hand. James muttered something about context, but his voice barely rose above a whisper. Rachel's mouth hung open. Emma looked stunned. James was already pulling his phone from his pocket, probably dialing damage control. Benjamin closed the folder. The Abigail Fund will begin operations next month, under Clara's direction. Its mission is to support overlooked elder women who have no voice in their own homes, in honor of the one who gave me mine. He stepped down. No applause. Clara helped me to the stage. I did not speak into the microphone. I did not need to. I simply looked at them, each of them, and smiled. Then I turned and walked away, and that sound, the silence that followed me, was louder than anything they had ever said behind closed doors. 3 months after the gala, the house that James and Rachel lived in went on the market, technically. In truth, it was acquired by a housing development group quietly funded by the Abigail Fund. Clara had seen to it with discretion and precision. A letter arrived by courier at their front door. Rachel opened it, skimmed the contents, and called James over in a panic. "They are doubling our rent," she said, her voice rising, "and they are not renewing the lease next year." James read the document silently. Then he noticed the company name on the letterhead. Martinez Living Initiatives, LLC. His hands trembled. He called the number listed. A receptionist answered, cheerful and crisp. "We are happy to speak with current tenants," she said, "but all lease terms are final. Thank you for calling." Click. Clara never spoke to them directly. She did not need to. The paper trail was clean, the timeline was fair, the logic was irrefutable. 12 months. Double rent. Then they would need to move. Rachel tried to protest publicly, but her voice no longer carried the same weight. Not after the recording from the gala had gone viral. A local reporter had picked it up. Then national media ran a piece on elder neglect, quoting Rachel verbatim. "She is a burden, a lesson in what happens when you have nothing to offer." The school board acted within days. Rachel was suspended indefinitely from her position as a school counselor. The board cited serious concerns regarding ethical conduct and professional values. Emma did not fare better. Her boyfriend, a young man from a prominent family, called her one evening. "My parents saw the clip," he said. "They asked if that is how you treat people, old people, family." She tried to laugh it off. "They said if you can speak that way about your grandmother, what happens when someone in their 80s lives in our house one day?" Then he added, quietly, "I do not think I know you, and I do not think I want to." He hung up. She screamed into a pillow for an hour, but no one came to comfort her. James lost the biggest client of his portfolio. A nonprofit group that specialized in elder care withdrew from a housing development contract, citing a loss of trust and ethical alignment. They attached a clip of his voice from the gala to their termination letter. "Every month she lives costs us more. That is just math." Math, indeed. They tried damage control, public apologies, online posts about lessons learned and family values. But it was too late. What they had treated as disposable had returned to define them. Emma lost followers. Rachel lost her job. James lost his partners, and none of them knew what to do next. Meanwhile, Clara kept building, quietly, strategically. With every brick she rewrote what justice could look like when love remembers. Meanwhile, Clara moved quietly through her days. She met with architects, therapists, city officials. She turned one of Abigail's old properties into a sanctuary, a residence for elderly women with nowhere else to go. Each room had a plaque. One read, "For the one who was told her gift was a rag." Another, "For the woman who gave and was forgotten." The largest plaque, however, was in the foyer. "Justice does not shout, it remembers." And Abigail? She spent her mornings in a garden planted just for her. Peonies, daffodils, a bench beneath an arch of roses. She drank tea, she watched the sun. She never once called James, or Rachel, or Emma. They wrote once, begging for a conversation. The letter was returned unopened, stamped, "No one here by that name remembers you." The sun rose slowly each morning over the hills beyond the windows of the residence where I now lived. Not a facility, not an institution. It was a sanctuary, a place built from grace and gratitude, designed by someone who once called me Mama Abi, through fevered lips in a hospital bed. Clara ran to the center with a quiet strength. No detail was too small for her care. The tea brewed precisely, the music gentle but full, the chairs warm and firm for old backs. Every woman who entered carried stories like mine. Some whispered, some shouted, all too long ignored. We lived together now in dignity. We laughed over soup, we argued about crossword puzzles, we remembered, and in remembering, we healed. Clara had created a space in the main hall called the Memory Wall. Each frame contained an object or artifact donated by a resident. Things that had once been dismissed, hidden, or nearly thrown away. In the center of the wall, behind a pane of glass, hung a scarf. It was cream-colored, soft wool, with pale blue edging and 3 stitched initials in one corner. AEM. Under it, a brass plaque read, "This was once called a rag, now it is a relic, proof that love leaves a mark even when unwelcomed." Clara placed it there herself. When I asked her why, she said simply, "Because it reminds me who you are." I stood in front of it one afternoon, hand gently resting on the glass. "I used to knit scarves with my hands," I said, half to myself. "Now I weave truth with my memory." Behind me, one of the newer residents, a woman named Frances, whispered, "Is that your work?" I smiled. "It is part of my story." We talked for an hour that day. She told me her daughter left her at a rest stop with a suitcase. I told her about a Christmas Eve and a designer bag. Every woman there carried something. And we carried each other. I no longer waited for calls that would not come. I no longer searched mailboxes for empty apologies. I wrote letters instead, to myself, to the little girl I used to be, to the nurse I once was. I tucked them in drawers or left them in the library for others to find. And I learned in those quiet days that forgiveness was not something you owed anyone. It was something you could give yourself, like sunlight through a clean window. Once Clara sat beside me on the porch and asked, "If you could say one thing to them now, what would it be?" I thought about it for a long time. Then I said, "If anyone ever told you that you were just a burden, remember this. A burden that walks away can make the ungrateful fall to their knees." Clara smiled, eyes glistening. She wrote it down. Later, she painted it on the entryway wall, just below the arch of rose vines. "A burden that walks away can make the ungrateful fall to their knees." It was the final gift I gave, and the first gift I claimed. They call me the firekeeper now, not because I'm loud or fierce, but because I remember, and I remind. Every Tuesday at the residence, I host Tea and Truth. It started as a small idea, just a few of us women gathered over jasmine tea and shortbread cookies, sharing the parts of ourselves the world tried to erase. Now it's a full room. We sit in a circle, no phones, no noise, just stories. Frances talks about how her son left her at a rest stop in Nevada. June tells of a husband who erased her name from the house deed. Marianne brings letters her daughter never read. And I bring a scarf, not the one under glass, another one, a new one. I still knit, my fingers are slower, but the thread remembers. Each woman who joins Tea and Truth gets a scarf. I choose the color by listening to her story. Sometimes deep green, sometimes rose gold, sometimes the color of the sea. I tell them, you were never meant to disappear, You were only waiting to be seen. Some cry, some laugh, some just hold the yarn to their cheeks and close their eyes. One day, a girl from the local college came to visit. She had short pink hair and a camera bag. She asked if she could record us for a project about forgotten women. I smiled. "We're not forgotten," I said. "We just took the long road back to the spotlight." She stayed 3 hours. She left with more stories than her camera could carry. The next week she returned with a draft article for the university paper. The headline read, "The Women Who Weren't Done Yet." I pinned it on the bulletin board next to Clara's hand-drawn floor plan of our first Abigail House expansion. Yes, there will be more. More homes, more rooms, more memory walls, more women who will never again be spoken over. Clara says we'll need a board of advisors. I told her, only if they've lived a life with hands that shook and still held firm. Sometimes Emma writes, small cards, polite, apologetic. I do not reply. I do not need to. Forgiveness is not an answer. It is a resting place I already found. James and Rachel? They've moved out of state. I heard through someone that Rachel now volunteers with elder rights groups. Funny, how life educates in echoes. And me? I rise early. I walk in the gardens. I braid my silver hair and wear brooches again. I send birthday cards to the women I sit with. I call their grandkids sweetheart and teach them how to make real soup. One of the young volunteers asked if I ever get tired of telling my story. I looked at her and said, I don't tell my story for me. I tell the next woman to believe she's a burden. She nodded, then cried. That night I wrote a new note for the memory wall. It says, if they call you a fire hazard, it's because you carry warmth they forgot how to feel. Signed, A.M. Not every story ends with revenge. Some end with a garden, a name remembered, and a scarf once called worthless, now preserved like royalty. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been overlooked, dismissed, or called a burden, remember this. Sometimes the smallest gifts, like a hand-knit scarf, carry the weight of love, survival, and a quiet strength no one can take away. I don't tell my story for pity. I tell it so we remember. So someone like you might realize. Silence is not weakness, and justice doesn't always need to shout. If this story touched you, please subscribe to Grandma True Stories. I have more memories to share, real stories, from the quietest woman in the room who remembers everything. Click subscribe so the next time a grandmother speaks, you'll be there to listen. We have so much more to uncover.